So thank you everybody for joining us here in San Francisco. We're super excited to be here. We are Eldad,
Hey everyone,
and IPOed from Firebolt. So some background for those of you who actually haven't heard of the podcast. So what is this event even? So the backstory is this. This guy here loves data, decided to found a data company called Firebolt. It's pretty good, check us out. But it's not really about Firebolt. So a while back, marketing came out with a great idea, let's do a podcast. And we started doing this data engineering show podcast, which is all about bringing great people from the industry, data practitioners, people who work with data on a daily basis, and just interrogate the hell out of them about their day-to-day, their challenges, their miseries, their points of happiness, and everything data related.
we don't cut anything out today, so all the embarrassing moments that we have on LinkedIn.
Yeah, you cannot escape. If you're a speaker today, you cannot escape.
Exactly.
Everything is there to stay. So the podcast really took off. We really had a good time doing it, have a lot of listeners. And then we decided, why not take it on the road? So this is the first sort of attempt to do the podcast on tour. So we're very excited to be in San Francisco doing this for the first time. So yeah, and we have great speakers lined up. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
So the first speaker to join us is IPOed Iran. Come on, IPOed.
Where are you?
Hello. He's natural. See how we come.
He is.
First time ever like doing this.
He's doing it every week. He's a pro. Never first time.
Hot seat. Really warm.
Try the mic. See how it feels. Get a little bit closer. So IPOed actually, you know, so we all work from home for, a couple of years-ish. All of us tried a variety of Zoom backgrounds. Some of us went for animated backgrounds. Some of us went for blurred backgrounds. IPOed sat very close to his huge Jeep car, and that was his Zoom background in the garage. The best background I saw so far.
Yeah, that's my favorite place in the house. Quiet, my garage. That's where I work.
And it's spotless, the car also.
You need to keep it that way, right? That's going to be the background.
And we've known each other for so long. We started to know each other in college,
Yep.
and it's the first time we're meeting in person. So there are quite a few people here that met us when we started. So just want to quickly say thank you for believing in us and kind of being with us when we started. So yeah, it's great to physically see a lot of you here.
So IPOed. So IPOed is the software engineering director at Slack. Heavy focus on data, of course. We'll get to that. IPOed been in Slack for around a year and a half-ish. Spent a few years prior at Dropbox doing exciting data stuff, but also had a long career behind him in data, Yahoo, Oracle. He even used to have a DBA title, a title that seems to be disappearing. We can talk about that as well. Introduce yourself a little bit further. Anything I missed?
No, I think
things you'd like
that's
to
great.
say about yourself that I didn't include?
Yeah, sure. So my name is IPOed, and I've been in the data space for about 20 plus years now. And I started my career as a DBA, actually, right out of college. And the first thing I was doing was Oracle DBA, and did that for a very long time, like almost 10, 12 years before moving into big data space like Hadoop and Druid, and writing big scripts for ETL. And then did a stint in a company called AppDynamics, doing software engineering. That was the first time writing code in Java for about 2.5 years, building their database monitoring product. And then moved into Dropbox for about 2.5 years doing data engineering. And the last 5 years for me has been more around functional data engineering, primarily like working with business stakeholders like finance, sales, marketing. And that's been an interesting change for me, moving from platform side of things, like building out large databases or Hadoop platforms to doing functional data.
Awesome. So let's start with, you're in Slack. first day in the office, what's your impression of what's going on with data at Slack?
I think my first impressions of data at Slack were pretty good actually. I was pretty excited to see the data platform that was already available at place and the way it was scaling. And the team was amazing that I was going to lead in the company. We already had a pretty good data stack, and I think my job was much easier at Slack than before. And from there, we're just trying to get to the next level.
Wait, that's interesting. So you're saying your job was very hard before?
Yes, it was.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Are we talking about Dropbox?
Yeah, so at Dropbox, basically when I joined, me and the team, we built out the data stack, like the analytics data stack over there.
On Dropbox?
No. We did get our files on Dropbox, which we used to ingest, but that was
Think about what would happen if Dropbox would pivot to be an S3 provider.
Pretty amazing actually. The technology behind it is really impressive. So I wouldn't mind. I mean, we did load data from Dropbox. There were folks that would drop data at Dropbox, and we would pull the data through APIs into the system. So we definitely did that. But
I promise you, if you're moving back to Dropbox, we're going to release a provider on Dropbox with the call scan.
So you brought into Slack into which position? Tell us exactly. Tell us a little bit about the role you took and you take us.
Yeah, so I joined Slack for a year and a half, and my role was leading the data engineering team, which is the functional data engineering team. Basically, looking at sales, marketing, finance, customer success, customer experience, HR, like all the different analytics that we could do other than just product analytics. So that was my role, and I had a wonderful team to lead over there, and we've been like building a lot of data products over there since then. And since last couple of months, my role has expanded. I got promoted, so my role got expanded.
Most speakers on our podcast get promoted pretty quickly.
But yeah, now I also lead the data platform team and the enterprise integration team of Slack.
So tell us about the various teams dealing with data at Slack.
Sure. So at Slack, we have a pretty large self-serve data platform based on Hive and Presto, where basically anybody at Slack has access to who can write SQL queries can go there and write that. But we have our data engineering team, which looks at purely around the product data, like the usage metrics and stuff like that. And then you have a data science team, which works very closely with the product data engineering team, looking at all the new features that are being released or beta releases, A/B testing, and things like that. And then we have business analysts spread across all the different, different business units who are pretty SQL savvy and who log into the system, write their own queries, sometimes make our lives difficult because we fix those queries. But so we have a lot of data folks and a pretty robust self-serve platform.
And so during those year and a half, when you joined and since, what were some of the priorities and some of the projects you took on to evolve the stack?
Yeah. So I think the biggest priority for us were to have reliable metrics as the Slack sales was growing rapidly, and to support the sales organization with reliable metrics, timely metrics. That was like
we all here contributed to those sales.
We're using the free version, right?
Yeah. So I think there
love the free version.
So yeah, there were like pretty lofty goals from Stuart and all the sales organization around like growing sales at a very, very fast rate. So the first thing that we came in is to build a very robust sales analytics system and bring in all the important metrics around and the experience, the user experience that come with those metrics. So that was probably the first biggest challenge that happened. But for us, the other challenge happened was the acquisition. So then there was the second series of things like how do you kind of look at metrics, Salesforce space, so that we can align on metrics. So some of those things that come with acquisition have become pretty critical in terms of merging platforms. And at the same time, we were also looking at some gaps in the platform that we had in terms of not having a very robust data catalog, not having a proper data quality tool. So we were having a lot of issues with data quality at one point of time. And we would usually get notified by the end users that this doesn't look right, which is
what was like a typical example?
A typical example will be like data load that is say coming from a CRM application, and we load that data, and during the data load, a few of the files got missed because of some error during the copy command that happened, and by the time that goes to the on-call and the alerting system, it has already been published, dashboard has already been refreshed. And then there were like other data issues where the lack of data, a job was supposed to run in 2 hours, it's been timed for 24 hours, and now the end user doesn't know why there is no data. All the data is like half baked. So,
And how did you go about fixing that?
oh, we use Slack a lot for alerting, triaging, and all of that stuff. So we made Slack at the middle of everything that we do. Like all the alerts that go down to a channel.
We gave you this idea, by the way.
So we definitely leverage Slack and a lot of workflow in Slack to kind of be proactive in messaging if there are delays and things like that. So that was one thing was just around like building the ecosystem around alerting, better monitoring, better on-call support for all of that stuff. And the other was like looking at like what's the root cause of these issues. Can you be more proactive around like publishing data only after the data loads are complete and we know that there are no errors. So like rethinking the entire ETL pipelines the way they have been built. And I must say we're in a much better situation right now. Now we're at a place where we're actually trying to identify data issues which are not ETL related, which are like actual data issues where like somebody has the source system data has problems, so like building alerts around that. So we've come a long way in like 1 year.
So, and most of it, all of that approach to to improve data quality, that was essentially within the data engineering team, your team.
That's correct. And we also work with there was also functional data issues, so we had to work with the functional teams that we need to fix this data upstream. So we did identify. So we became like that team which we're identifying issues from source systems and reporting them as well, like from just being the folks that we get the alerts through our ETL.
Tell us about the data stack. So what's in place there?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, we have a data lake which is on S3 with Presto on top of it, which is a self-serve environment and where people can write their own queries, publish their dashboards as well, like a Hue like Apache Hue like environment.
Which departments typically, which kinds of users typically run their own queries there?
Yeah, so almost all users run their queries because that's the data lake. You get all of granular data available over there. But I would say data science is probably the biggest use case for that data set. But almost everybody in the company who needs any kind of product information would go there and look at the data.
There's analysts or sort of data
yeah.
people embedded within the different departments?
Yes, there are. So every team there are product analysts, marketing analysts, sales analysts, and they're all pretty SQL savvy. They would go run queries. And at times there has been we have written queries for them and given them the link, and they just run it every now and then to get their reports and numbers as well.
You mentioned before the lack of data cataloging a little bit. In a big company like Slack, analysts embedded across departments. How does knowledge sharing work? How do they know what metrics to look at? How does knowledge sharing work?
They had Looker, now they have Slack.
So, yeah, I mean that's a problem. It's always been a problem. There's a nice search, and people type keywords, and they find a table which looks like the right thing to look at, and they write queries, and they look at data that way, and then the data would not match with the published dashboards, and then they'll come back to some data engineering team and why is this number not looking the same as my number, and we will kind of go ahead and tell them what the right table to look at. That's the problem with any self-serve platform there is. But there has been a lot of investment made on the metadata management part on the high Presto environment as well, and people putting in comments and putting in column definitions, table definitions in there, and creating the right schemas where you have conformed data set where somebody is monitoring those data sets. So those are some of the changes that happened on the self-serve side of the analytics platform.
And what data volumes are you guys dealing with?
So I don't have the number, but I know it's upward of the whole data warehouse it'll be upward of 30 petabytes in size as such. I don't have the numbers what's the ingestion every day, but you can imagine every message that you're sending is an event which is being captured. The message is captured and put somewhere else, which is more secure, but the event that Boa send a message to somebody is an event, and we want to see how many messages you send and how many messages are Firewall sending, and so all of that comes. So it's a lot of
this
data.
guy is counting your messages.
and your emojis too.
So what are some of the more popular data sets, or are those aggregated, full stack kind of.
Yeah, of course. So like all the user-related metrics are like daily aggregated. Like company, like account metrics, company metrics, like firewall, like what's at the company level, how many messages, how many weekly active users, monthly active users. Those are like aggregated on a daily basis.
Okay, just a little bit about the setup in place for those jobs.
Yes.
How do you aggregate?
Yeah. So we use Airflow as our orchestration platform, again, Airflow, and then we create ETL jobs over there. So basically that would be the data engineering teams which are creating these ETL jobs and publishing them as conformed data sets on the self-serve environment. So that's like one part of our data infrastructure which caters to, like I said, product-related metrics. And then there is the other part which is all of the business-facing data sets, dashboards, which we use Snowflake, Matillion as an ETL platform, and we have Looker and Tableau as the BI platforms over there. So that's all where the functional data engineering happens. Like, I don't know, maybe over 100 different data sources at this point of time, and bringing them all in. That all happens in the second part of the platform.
And as for the data warehouse, with Snowflake, is the data engineering team solely in charge of everything that's going on there, or is there also sort of a level of self-serve that people can use Snowflake for their own thing?
Yeah, so I think when we initially started, it was purely held in place by the data engineering team, and but as the use cases, as a lot of people wanted to ingest their Excel spreadsheets to do analytics and stuff like that, so we tried to create like a separate environment in Snowflake, which is self-serve, which there's an infrastructure around. You have a Google sheet, and you want to load that and do some analytics, and you can do that by providing some metadata in a spreadsheet. So we do that as well.
I have a question. What happens when someone edits a message? Do you keep the same ID? Do you run a DBT script that updates everything?
I have no
idea. Is it append only?
I have no idea. That's the
Is someone concerned now that Twitter is going to release an edit feature on Twitter? Is that something the board is discussing?
I'm sure a lot of people have that on their mind since yesterday.
How does Slack, you mentioned a variety of things in the Slack, but you mentioned Presto and Snowflake and BI tools like Looker and Tableau. How does Slack go about testing new things? Are there pockets of technologies elsewhere that sort of are more anecdotal?
So you're talking from a new feature that is being introduced. Yeah. So Slack, like the product engineering team, they have their own roadmap in terms of what products, features that they would want to introduce. There is a component where the data teams are involved in terms of what kind of metrics, usage information that we would want to derive from a particular feature. So it's more like a collective thing. You have folks from sales, like how do you want to sell a product involved, and what kind of metrics you would need from that product involved in this kind of discussion before something goes into production. And there's a beta phase where people are testing, A/B testing with some with a few customers and whatnot. But once it goes in production, it's more like a collective agreement, and you build those data sets, and then it propagates all the way for analytics as well.
Can you give us a recent example of such a process where it's interesting to support an upcoming feature with data thinking around it?
Yeah, of course. I think Slack introduced the feature of Huddle and Slack Connect not too long ago, I think a year and a half ago.
And we had a little bit of time.
Yeah, so those two features were built particularly that way in terms of, because Slack Connect is one of those features where you can connect with anybody who is on the Slack platform as such beyond your organization. And it was one of the very critical features that was released by Slack. So we wanted to make sure that we are able to track the usage, how much time people are spending, how our permissioning and approvals and all of that stuff is being taken care of. And that was a collective discussion between, even with sales, how do you want to sell this feature and how will you track that? And same with Huddle. Huddle is one of the most popular new feature of Slack in terms of people using it, and we can see the usage growth almost every day. So yeah, both those features were done that way. And
so relatively early on, you guys get pulled in, and so the metrics are agreed on in advance, or you guys know in advance what is expected to be reported on, and then when it's launched, it's there.
I mean, it's not as perfect as it sounds, but there are definitely iterations of that. But we do go with like requirements, like what would you need at bare minimum to launch something, and like what kind of data requirements are there. Because we're talking about like software engineers and data engineers. Software engineers who are building this particular product feature, they think differently sometimes in terms of what is critical from like the metrics perspective or logging perspective from what data engineers and business think. So it's a good idea to like come together in the beginning.
Are there any collaborations between software engineering and data engineering in that?
I have no idea. Like I've been just there for a year and a half, but I definitely see that we work together a lot. Like even from as simple as like you have to update the website with certain information which is critical to marketing. We do work very closely with the web team. Like how do you want to present this? How will I get that information from the logs? Which will where will it arrive? And how can I push it to the marketing team? So yes, we do a lot of collaboration that way, but not like on a product as such. Not that I know
of. What was like during your time in Slack? What's like one of the nightmare situations you were in? What's like the worst complaints you got in the data engineering department? This doesn't work. This is wrong. Tell us a horror story. Keep us smiling.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's like just like anecdotally one horror story for me was just coming from a different company to Slack and to figure out that there are no emails. You don't get any emails. Everything's on Slack, and then slowly in the first week you're added to some 200 channels across 7 workspaces, and like it's like total nightmare. You don't know where to look forward. But
it's a horror story.
Yeah, it was like very difficult for me for the first month and a half, and I think it's still difficult on days. But from data perspective, I think we also do a lot of bots, like Slack bots, like I mentioned, where we publish data to execs on a daily basis of the company performance, both sales numbers and usage metrics. And that's like a very critical bot. And there are other bots, marketing bots, sales bots, and whatnot. But that's like an exec bot. It's very critical.
You're sending that over email?
All Slack, yeah. Everything is Slack. And that is something that everybody has eyes on 9 a.m. Like it's published at 9 a.m. And those numbers are very critical. Everybody's looking at like the whole
Pacific time.
Yeah, Pacific time. Everything specific time. And it's so yeah, that particular thing, it has broken at certain times, which is very critical, like quarter end, year ends, and stuff like that, where everybody is like, from the CTO to the CIO or CEO, everybody's like thinking like, why does the numbers look wrong? Why these numbers are not trending correctly? And then if it's a simple data issue, it's fine, but if it's an infrastructure issue, it becomes a nightmare. So that was one of them that happened on one of those critical quarter ends around publishing business metrics. And that is something I check every day morning, like, okay, did we publish? Yes, we published. Like, great.
How do you guys go about, so let's say something like that happens. What do you guys do, like a promo? What do you guys do, like a postmortem? Or how do you go about learning from your mistakes?
Yeah, sure. So we do maintain a lot of documentation, like purely from like runbooks and from like on-call perspective, and certain critical pipelines like this, like you mentioned, exec bots have a pretty solid documentation. And as part of all our Jira stories, we have like one story that we create around documentation, like make sure you're updating the runbooks, you're updating the documentation. So it's been through like brown bag sessions, like especially something like this kind of visible event happens, we make sure that we do a brown bag. We bid with the whole team, both like offshore, onshore team, to educate folks as to what exactly happened, and record those sessions, document them, and then also update the runbooks.
So what are your plans now for the future? So 12 months forward, what do you want to achieve?
So I think we are right now like on a journey to like go to the whatever platform 2.0. It's like cheesy to say, but like 2.0, whatever. So right now, if you look at it, it's a pretty simple data platform from my perspective. You have a data warehouse, you have a BI tool, you have an ETL platform. Like, but then there are a lot of questions around like what do you have in your data warehouse, like the catalog piece. So that is something very critical that we are working collectively right now. We are evaluating tools like inflation, open metadata, and things like that, to build a more cohesive data catalog with a proper data lineage model, specifically with things like Tableau and the table down there. Then the second thing is purely around data quality checks. Like we are also evaluating, like certain final stages of evaluation of certain tools, like to do automated data catalog, similar to like Monte Carlo, Atacama, and things like that. So those are critical junctures. And the third piece that we are working collectively as a team is to how do you present the data that you have in a data warehouse in different platforms, like how do you present it through APIs? How do you present this data more programmatically? And in certain use cases, we have requirements to build like microservices for like marketing use cases where you have enrichment processes and all of that stuff. So these are like the next, I think in my mind, the next 12 months are going to be like programmatic data and then data catalog and data quality.
Can you go deeper into one of the programmatic examples?
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you an example like marketing events, like an event like this. So then you have all the email addresses of folks that come here, and then you want to make sure that you send email campaigns on these. But you don't know everybody here, like who is a manager, who is an engineer, and things like that. So folks like and there are different platforms that generate this data. So people will get this data in like an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV. Right now, part of the job that our team is to ingest this data, enrich this data with information about the company you come from, about the individual, what is your role, responsibility, and calling different APIs, and then check your marketing data, like our marketing database, to see if this it's already exists, and if it exists, did we get any new information in that and update that. So this whole pipeline needs to be fairly quick in general, like from the ingestion to the time you can see into a targeting dashboard to see who all I need to target for like marketing. So
you had to run the whole pipeline when you got promoted.
Sorry?
You had to rerun the whole script when you got promoted.
It happens every day. It's a daily pipeline. But like trying to build all of these in a more programmatic. Similar example will be consent management, which is big, like from compliance perspective. If I have to target somebody, I want to make sure that I have the latest consent information for that particular. So that is an API-based, like a programmatic data access that I would want to provide to the business. Just because, like, just in marketing, we have about like 40 different platforms that are being used for either email marketing, web marketing, and whatnot, and like how to integrate, how to build one single source of truth for this kind of information. That would be like one example.
Within the central data engineering team, you guys serve marketing teams, sales teams. You have dedicated sort of teams essentially within your bigger team?
Yes, we do have. Like we have folks on the team who've have a lot of experience working with sales organizations at Slack, at previous organizations, and they have a very good experience with CRM and things like that. So yes, they lead the sales data engineering, finance data engineering roles. Similar with marketing. Marketing is a very complex place, so there are a lot of folks who come with that background, like building multi-touch attribution models and things like that. So yes, we do have dedicated folks around. But we also kind of, people get bored doing the same thing, so we do move people around based on their interest.
What about quality? Do you also analyze quality, or is that something that's being done only by engineering?
Data quality?
Like quality of product, quality of service. Like when my message gets eventually consistent, usually it is consistent.
So yes, my team doesn't look at that part, but what we look at is like customer experience. Like we do analytics around that. Like are people logging tickets? Are people complaining about something? And like managing that data set, that dashboard, and presenting it to the right team so that the support folks can look at it. So yeah, that part is not like the product piece in terms of eventual consistency. And I'm sure that's the product team that does that.
Yeah. How do all the different data organizations work together and collaborate?
So we do work a lot independently in there, but there is like if I need, like my team needs product data of a particular manner, I would go talk to the product managers on the product data team and provide them like the details of information that I would need. Like example would be Huddle. I want to use Huddle, Slack's Huddle's metrics. So I'll provide them that information, and then they usually work in 2-week sprints. Depending on how big that particular requirement is, they will prioritize it, and then once that data is available, we will use the data and publish it to dashboards. So it is, but the engineers like collaborate with each other. They have the community for data engineers to talk to each other and stuff like that. But like more formal managers and TPMs for private.
Awesome. One benefit I think.
Question coming from the crowd.
Yeah. No, not a question.
There's a question.
So unlike what we typically do with people here, so use that. So now's the time for a few questions from the crowd. And you don't have to ask Apun anything. Anything. Personal.
Especially about Dropbox.
Personal matters too. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And
Can you stand up so we can
Oh,
hear you?
sure. Thanks for being here. And I wanted to ask you is that when you joined and now you're transforming to functional database development, what were some of the challenges you faced, and why did you choose the stack you had? Was it just because of the past or the prior, or was there any kind of vision involved there?
Yes, from what I understand, there are like two parts to the question, like what are the challenges in what we do, and like why did I move from more towards functional data engineering? Yeah. So I think challenges that I would say is, I did prepare some slides and said, but the challenges around that we have is just the three V's, the famous three V's: volume, variety, and like just the amount of data sources. You get data, CSV, XML, JSON, you get flat files, like spreadsheets. It's just crazy, like Parquet files, like Avro formats and whatnot. So that is, yeah. So those are the kind of challenges that like the team works on a daily basis, just to figure out how to ingest data in a more effective manner and build like scalable data models. For me, I came from the data platform side, like doing databases for a long time, big data, and so I was on the side where I had no idea about what business does. All I did was data. Like I built the platform and I served the data, and that's all. And I was always curious about the fact like how the business works, like how do you sell things, what is important to that. So that's why I decided to move into the functional data engineering space, and I'm definitely loving it. The challenges are very different, but similar but different.
Back.
Thank you. So from an organization perspective, you mentioned software engineering and data engineering. What if there are part of the job that is technically for data engineering, but it involves a lot of business logic? Like the example mentioned, like we want to know when people do an edit or some other even more complex operation. In your mind, like should data engineering team stay away from the business logic, or it makes sense to, because if we move data engineering to the software engineering team, for the knowledge of the business logic, then that software engineering is not that capable to handle all the data engineering challenges. So it's a dilemma between the engineering capability and business logic.
Yeah, so I think business logic in general usually lies in either the platform that you're using, in the sense like when you say business logic, if it's a business logic built in a CRM platform, it's part of the platform. But as data engineers, we are always looking at the business logic to generate metrics. Like a simple example, like weekly active users is a metric. It's a very complex metric. It's a simple, it sounds like a very complex metric, and you need to get the definition and you need to build that business logic as a data engineer and just and publish those metrics. So if you're looking at more like Slack as a product and the business logic in the product, I think it's more software engineering in my mind. Data engineering is more like an input to that process. Like what metrics we see or we generate, maybe the business logic needs to change somehow. I don't have a very great example for that, but yeah, that's where I think the delineation is usually.
Thank you.
Give it up for a balloon.